Happy Friday, Superior Fence and Rail family. This is what I like to call the QSP close. It stands for quality, service, and price. This close is designed to show value in what's most important to the customer. When someone presents a budget or a price concern, but is telling you that quality and service are equally as important as the price, this is a great close to provide as a clearer reason to pick Superior Fence and Rail. This close is really designed for sales reps that know their competition and can provide factual data. Let's say that you install posts 2.5 feet in the ground, but your competitor only goes 2 feet in the ground. This will mean that you do a 102-inch post while they install a 96-inch post. Let's say you do 60 to 80 pounds of concrete, but they only use a half a bag of concrete. We use a 3-year workmanship warranty, but let's say your competitor only has a 1-year workmanship warranty. How do you transition these obvious facts and advantages to let the customer know that not only is your customer name superior, but this is what we're going to provide to them as we progress through their job? Studies have shown that only 13% of prospective buyers will put price above all other factors when making a buying decision. These are just customers that we don't want anyway. They're the people that paid $1,800 for a fence and are complaining that we didn't move them to the front of the line despite not knowing that our average sale is over $7,000. In this same study, it shows that if you've satisfied the need for why they need a fence, the number one factor they're going to use in making their buying decision is they're going to buy from people that they trust. So it comes down to confidence. I like to use a couple different analogies when they say, hey, I've had another company come out and their price was cheaper or their price was lower. I'll ask them some questions like, hey, do you mind me asking who the other company was and how much lower were they? Once I've sat down and I've kind of done a breakdown of the job and I've compared to make sure that all the measurements are the same, the materials are the same, this is when I'll go into the QSP close. Let's say they have you beat by $500. Okay, so what I hear you saying is that ABC Fence has us beat on price by $500 for the exact same thing, right? And they're going to say, yeah, yep, that's exactly right. First, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I assume that you're wanting me to match their price or beat that price. And of course, they're going to say, yeah. So, I always will say something like, well, if you don't mind, let me ask you a few more questions. Is your decision solely going to be based upon price? Or is quality and service going to play a role when you're making this decision? Price isn't the main objective, but it is important to us. They love to say stuff like that. That's great to hear. The reason I ask is I like to make a few quick comparisons that will maybe help you make your final decision. Let's pretend for a second you and your significant other are going out to have like an anniversary dinner at a steakhouse. Now, obviously, you can use any kind of restaurant, but for this example, we're going to go ahead and use a steak restaurant. They say, yeah, we go to Burns, which is this outstanding steakhouse here in the Tampa area. In fact, it's like the place to go. Everybody pretty much has been there at some point. So when you go to Burns, that the waiter or the waitress is going to be assigned to you is only going to have maybe 3 to 4 tables. They're going to come out and explain the steak selections, and they're going to say stuff like, oh, it's USDA prime cut steak, which is all, only 2 to 3% of all meat on the market. We dry age it 45 days, and we hand brush the cattle with the softest bristles, and we give them daily massages, and we affirm their egos, and we tell them they're amazing. You get the point. So you're going to get an amazing steak, right? So this place has such amazing service that when you take a sip of water, they're putting more water in it before you can even let the ice melt. But we know that you can only go to this place because it's a celebration. It's not your regular date night place that has a good steak, some good wings, great burgers. So this place is going to be expensive, right? So when you're making an important decision, we know that 3 factors are taken into consideration. What kind of quality am I getting? What's the service I'm going to be getting? And finally, is this a price that I can afford or I think that matches the other quality and the service that I'm going to be provided? Out of these 3 factors, you're only guaranteed to ever get 2. The steakhouse, for example, you're going to get the best cut of meat, the service is going to be impeccable, but you're going to be paying top-notch pricing for that. You could go to Outback Steak, though, get a decent steak, The waiter or waitress is probably going to have 10 to 12 tables, and you may sit there waiting for a refill, but it's going to be a third of the cost and the fancy place that you were planning on going to. You know, it's like getting on an airplane these days. If you want the aisle or the window and you want to sit close to the front of the plane so you can get off quickly, guess what? You're going to pay for that. If you don't mind sitting way in the back, taking a middle seat, getting to know all your seat mates, you know, you're going to pay significantly less. The reality is that you're both going to get to that same place at the same time, and what you're really paying for is the comfort and the convenience, and that has a price for it, right? So what would a fence company have to do to make their price $500 lower than ours? Customer is going to answer you, and typically they're going to say something like, oh no, I get it, you know, you're right. But if they don't, you know, you need to ask some other questions. So I'll say something like, well, listen, I know what it takes to be $500 or even more less than us, and I'm confident that they aren't nearly as big as Superior Fence and Rail, so they don't have our same buying power. They don't have our 3-year workmanship warranty, so they're not going to offer the same service. And knowing what I know about this industry, there are other areas that you can cut costs that aren't going to be noticeable to the customer, like doing stuff below grade, by not putting your post as deep in the ground, by not using as much concrete, not using a longer post. And these are things where you're not going to see the difference. So if we're offering the highest quality and the best service, but we aren't the lowest price, I guess my real question to you is, if the only thing they're offering you is really the lower price and not the quality or not the same service, which one of the two are you willing to take and sacrifice in order to get the lowest price? So they're either going to realize at that time, you know, which one am I picking? If they say it's the quality, I'm going to ask them, you know, what have you ever bought that was the cheapest possible item and you were blown away by it? Or what was the second best pick? Did it last as long? You know, were you completely satisfied with it? If they say service, then I'm going to make sure that they understand that a service call to adjust a gate, you know, after that 1-year workmanship warranty is going to be a minimum of $350 to $500. And that's just not the savings that they're thinking they're getting today. It's just going to end up costing them in the long run. And then if there's any other ones, they're going to have to pay for that too. With us, they get 3 full years. You always want to finish with a closing question. So if they say, well, I really wouldn't want to sacrifice on either one of those, then your response needs to be something like, then it sounds like we're the right choice for you. And, you know, how did you want to pay for that? Did you want to do the half down, or did you want to take advantage of one of our great financing options? Remember, confidence is what you're selling. Be confident and go for the close. Have a great weekend and happy selling.